Mass Media.
Welcome to the Independent Voter Podcast from Independent Voter Project. We're going to expand a little bit. A new era of independent voter news that the journalists just don't cover. It's where we have these debates on a national level, really taking on issues so that people have more educated disagreements with each other. Let's just explain how the process really works.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm here again with Tara McCormick. I'm still down here in Brazil. Tudo bem, todos. We had some exciting activity up there in the States this last week, right, Tara?
Yeah, we've definitely been holding down the fort while you've been away in Brazil. This week, we're covering the redistricting battle royale that's going on across the country. IVN had an exclusive story. I'm calling it the Independent Commissioner Strikes Back. What happened was one of the independent commissioners on the Redistricting Commission in California, his name is Ray Kennedy. He basically came forward to say that before the current redistricting efforts even happened, and before they were even like a gleam in the eye of Gavin Newsom, and before Texas did what it did, that the state was already totally starving the commission of its ability to do its job. And we have a great clip that we can listen to now that we posted up on Facebook with the comments. It starts off with Gavin Newsom.
We'll pick up 5 seats with the consent of the people. We tried to play by a higher set of standards and rules with our independent redistricting, and we believe in that. And we are not talking about eliminating that commission.
Governor Newsom and his colleagues have now shown us that independent citizen redistricting may have always been, in some ways at least, an illusion. If politicians can step in to draw their own maps whenever they want, and then ask the voters to approve them, how much true power did we have in the first place? What is to stop them from doing the same thing 10 years from now in the middle of the next cycle? It is not the people of California who have initiated this effort to replace the maps produced by the Citizens Redistricting Commission. Instead, it comes from the very politicians that the voters of California intended to remove from the process. Those politicians did not have the power to draw new maps, and yet they did, and are now asking the state's voters to endorse their action.
So there you have it. Ray Kennedy had some pretty harsh words, calling it a plan that was schemed up without the commission's input. They were not given any formal notice. And now, he's saying that they've been starved of money and that they don't even have the means to meet. So what do you think about that, Chad?
I mean, it's so disingenuous, and I don't want to, like, as soon as you say that, you go, oh, you're picking on California. What about all the Republicans? Yeah, the Republicans are disingenuous too. I mean, I think we're going to talk about what's going on in Texas right now later, but the fact that like, oh, we're just doing this because Trump and Republicans or whatever happened in Texas was just the excuse to go and get rid of the Independent Redistricting Commission here, in my opinion. What's important is, when they go, oh, well, you don't have the funding. We didn't have the funding. We're in a budget deficit. We couldn't fund the Independent Redistricting Commission. Well, somehow they came up with $300 million to run this campaign and then to redo the maps and do all the stuff when they wanted to. It's kind of disheartening to see that, both sides do it, understand why they do it. And if you put yourselves in Gavin Newsom's shoes and you want to put on the national stage and run for president, I can understand why they do it. And put yourself in the shoes of the Democratic legislator that really passionately believes that their agenda is going to be stopped if they don't also gerrymander against Republicans. And I can see all those points of views, but it's at one point you say, hey, we're going to be the side or the people that don't race to the bottom, and we're going to rise above it. I don't know when that happens.
So, I mean, I think it's again, as you and I both know so well, the partisans in the legislatures across the country, the governors, they're all either Democrats or they're Republicans, and they're going to use the laws to their advantage. And they don't like independent commissions telling them what to do. They want to be able to gerrymander the states. They want to keep doing it. This is what they've always done. This week, North Carolina, we found out, which is the most gerrymandered state, is about to get even more gerrymandering. On Monday, I don't know if you saw this, but North Carolina legislative leaders said that they're going to vote next week to redraw their districts. And they're going to take the already right-leaning boundaries and make them even better for the GOP. The background a little bit, Chad, is that in 2023, North Carolina created a map that resulted in the GOP winning 10 out of the 14 of that state's House seats. North Carolina is 50-50. So in 2023, they created a map, and in 2024, they won 10 out of the 14 states. Under the old map that they used in 2022, it was 7-7. So that's
but you can go to any state, right? You could go to Illinois, California, whatever it is. Nobody's congressional representation is even close to what even California. It's not like it's 90% Democrats in California, right? Illinois, Texas, wherever it is, it just shows you how much the parties have control. When they take control of the state, both sides go and do whatever they can to get as much of the congressional representation in their party's favor. And
exactly.
See what's going on.
And that's just what they're going to do. So that's why, Texas, Gavin Newsom says that Texas started it. And the House Speaker in North Carolina is basically saying, because of what Gavin Newsom did to respond to Texas, that now North Carolina Republicans need to try to get another seat, right? They got to get it to 11, from 10 to 11 out of 14 now they want.
Right. And it's the politics of children. Oh, they did it. No, they did it. They did it, and that's where we're at right now in the state of politics. I mean, look at Texas now. And to define, though, how much this is a nonpartisan issue is look at what's going on in Texas right now. I mean, we see it in comments all the time on IVP. Our commenters from Texas are very proud of their open primaries because we talk about those primaries a lot in this state doing that. And I love it when I see the comments from Texas. They go, well, in Texas, we can pick whatever ballot we want. Well, we'll see how long that lasts. I mean, just like the Democratic Party did in California, the Republican Party in Texas, after many years of trying, voted in favor to privately close their primary. And so now they're suing the Secretary of State in Texas because they don't want to have an open primary. They want voters to have to join the party before they can vote in the primary.
So we're switching from one of our favorite subjects about redistricting to another favorite subject of ours at Independent Voter Podcast, which is open primaries. And Chad is talking about this week, the Republican Party in Texas has sued the state of Texas to try to shut down Texas's famous open primary system. Basically, the way it works in Texas is nobody registers with the party. You're just a registered voter. And then on primary day, you go to your ballot box and you say, I would like a Democratic primary ballot or I would like a Republican primary ballot. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a member of the party. You don't have to have joined the party. You don't have to have been a member of the party for 17 and a half days before the election and all these other crazy rules that they have. It's a very open system. And, of course, an open system is not what the partisans want. So the Texas GOP, oh, by the way, they've had this system since 1905 in Texas, where you can do it this way. And nevertheless, the Republicans have now gone to court and sued the Republican Secretary of State and the state of Texas to try to close the primaries down. And the woman who's the Secretary of State is named Jane Nelson, and the Attorney General of the state is a guy called Ken Paxton. And Ken Paxton is also a Republican. He's been the Attorney General for maybe 11 years. Quite a lot of controversy and scandal. But this really takes the cake, in my opinion, Chad. Basically, what happens when a state gets sued is the Attorney General, as the people's lawyer, is supposed to defend the state against the lawsuit. So in this case, Ken Paxton is supposed to be doing his job defending the state against the filing of the lawsuit by the GOP trying to close the primaries. What he's done instead, Chad, you want to talk about it?
Well, I think this is for anybody who comments, and every time we post something about California or stuff, we get in the comments, it's like, oh, why are you always picking on Democrats? You guys are just undercover Republicans. Okay, well, let me do it. Let me do it right here. Okay, my opinion, which I think is a very good opinion, is that Ken Paxton fundamentally doesn't understand what his job is here. And it does it by a statement. He's the attorney general. His job is to defend the laws of the state. In this case, the Republican Party of Texas sues the state saying, no, we want to close our primaries. Ken Paxton not only says, I'm not going to defend Texas law that's been there for over 100 years. He also says, I'm going to actually write a brief on the side of on the Texas Republican Party. Then he goes even further. He goes even further than that. And he says, it's time that we do what the voters want. The question goes, what are you talking about? When did Texas voters ever say they wanted to close their primary? Obviously, what he's referring to is at the party convention, where about 1 in 1,000 Texans actually go to a party convention. The diehard Republican Party voters decided, after failing, even among those people, they failed to support closing their primaries for decades. They finally broke the majority barrier within that tiny number of voters to say, our party wants to tell the state of Texas to use your tax dollars to fund our private primary and not let registered citizens vote in the first stage of the election process. And Ken Paxton says that's the will of the voters, right? Which the only reason this discussion is not more nationalized is because the Democratic Party doesn't want to have this discussion, because it's the same thing they do whenever they're given the opportunity. All you got to go do is look a couple of years ago in Hawaii, when the Hawaiian Democratic Party tried to do the same thing. Fortunately, the court stopped the Hawaiian Democratic Party's success there, and we're going to have to see what the court says here. Thank God, for those of you are actually support open primaries, the Secretary of State is Jane Nelson, who is also a Republican, but I would say is a very different kind of Republican, and has voiced her support for defending the laws of Texas, including its open primaries. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we will see where it goes. It's super interesting. Just a common theme. I just feel like it just comes up over and over and over again in our podcasts these last few months, Chad, is that, the partisans are going to use whatever power is available to them that's on the table. It's like that in some ways is democracy working, right? That these tools and these levers are all available. It doesn't make it right, but they are going to use it, which is why it's so important for people to get involved in independent politics and to be able to look at these issues granularly and to watch what's happening and to be aware of what's happening. And in the cases where we can, to push back. When we were looking at the Texas open primary system and looking at the history of it, you reminded me of this case. I'm not a lawyer, you are, but I definitely pay a lot of attention to past to case law. So back in 1944, the United States Supreme Court ruled in a case called Smith versus Allwright that Texas political parties cannot set their own rules in a way that excludes voters, because at the time, the Texas Democratic Party only allowed for white voters to participate in their primaries. So this is 1944, and the Democrats in Texas said only white people could vote in their primaries. They said, we're a private organization. We can decide who's going to take part, which is not unlike the argument that the Texas Republicans are making today in 2025, right? The Ken Paxton
saying right now.
That's what they're saying right now. But the court disagreed at that time. They said primary elections are a crucial part of the public election process, and they must be open to all the voters. And so that decision that many years ago ended the state's white primary system. And I think it's really interesting because Thurgood Marshall was just a lawyer at the time. He wasn't on the Supreme Court yet. And there was a documentary about him, I think just this week or last week on public radio. And so we have a clip that we can listen to in his own words, Thurgood Marshall, talking about that case, Smith versus Allwright.
What were the cases that you became involved in that you feel have meant the most?
Well, the primary case in Texas, Smith against Allwright, was, I think, the first real big one I had. There had been 4 previous cases, and Negroes still weren't voting in the primary, and Chief Judge Hutchins' son, I think it was, he drafted the first white primary law to keep Negroes out. So, I mean, I knew where his heart was. And he started in on his questioning. And he questioned me about qualifications for voters, step by step, back. He had me on my feet for 3 hours. And he ruled against it. I said, well, I'm going to Supreme Court. He said, of course. And I saw him a couple months later, and he says, have you filed your petition for certiorari yet? I said, no, sir. He said, well, why don't you hurry up? You know you're going to win. And we brought it up here, and we did. We won it.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. They won that case. You know, he won 29 out of the 32 cases that he argued before the Supreme Court, Chad. And of course.
Yeah, I mean, put this case, like, how wonderful that segment is, right? The judge that wrote the law that ruled against him is the one that said, have you filed your writ of certiorari left, right? There's some things, like, these are the types of cases that, like, when you talk about voting rights, this national discussion, I mean, there's important issues about voter ID and these and things, right? But when you're talking about the fundamental right to vote, Smith v. Allwright is an important case. One, for African Americans, obviously, and noteworthy. We're talking about what the Republican Party is doing today. This was the Democratic Party not that long ago that was excluding blacks, right? What the court said in that case and what Marshall argued is it's the argument that Independent Voter Project and open primaries and everybody is arguing today.
Totally.
If you don't have the right to vote in the primary election, you don't have the right to vote at all, because it's an integral stage and it defines the candidates, right? You won that case, just like the lower judge said, that ruled against him and said, file your writ, you're going to win. I don't want to compare the level. I mean, I think this is important, but that was obviously a fundamental case. But look at what the court ruled when Independent Voter Project went and argued before the Third Circuit in the case in New Jersey. And the case against New Jersey was, hey, New Jersey has closed primaries. Half of your electorate are independent voters that can't vote. Independent Voter Project argued that's unconstitutional. The primary is an integral stage. These voters have exercised their First Amendment right not to join a political party. What the court has said in the Third Circuit, the standing law for which Independent Voter Project has filed a writ but has not been accepted by the Supreme Court, is literally, quote, just join a party. That's their term. No, independent voters don't get a vote in the primary. They should just join a party, which I think on its face, if we have a First Amendment right of association and non-association, how could you have a ruling that has to do with your fundamental right to vote, as Marshall argued, and the court agreed 75, 80 years ago, right? But the current law under the Third Circuit, articulated by a judge who his other judge mates didn't even sign the opinion, right? Says, if you want to vote in a primary, just join a party. That's the current state of the law, Kara, and there's probably maybe 5 people talking about this on a national level.
It's true. And, that's exactly what Paxton is saying should be happening in Texas. That, can you imagine that, I don't know, what is it, like 19 million voters or something now are going to have to, in order to vote, they're going to have to register proactively with the party. It's kind of like they've been totally free. And Ken Paxton, who's the attorney general, who's supposed to be the people's lawyer, is basically saying no more freedom. You have to choose. If you want to play, you got to pay. You have to sign up. You're not free to participate in the way that you've been able to do for 120 years. And the thing that we forgot to talk about when we were talking about Ken Paxton? Okay, this to me is just crazy. He is running for United States Senate in a Republican primary that's meant to take place in March of 2026. Right. So he is not only not representing the people of Texas as the people's lawyer in defending their 120-year-old law that gives them the right to vote. He's saying, I'm running, right? And I want to basically change the rules in the very race where I'm running to try to help me by keeping people who wouldn't want to vote for me out.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if I
Right?
can take this opportunity, I know you usually do this, but look, I pick it on the Democrats. Hey, you're the party that excluded black voters, right? And the court had to intervene, right? You're the party doing this now in California. And now I go, that's right. I'm saying that because I want to set it up to pick on Ken Paxton really hard. We're talking about what is defined as the more conservative MAGA wing, however you want. And I'm not even picking on MAGA at all. I try to stay out of that fight. I think there's a lot of things that the folks in the MAGA have brought up that are important. But one of the things they talk about is this threat of communism, right? We got to stop this threat of communism, right? Which maybe they're right about. But think about the absurdity of what Ken Paxton is now arguing. He's threatened about this push towards communism in the United States, but his position in Texas is if you want to vote in our representative democracy, you must just join the party. Right? Does anybody else find that ironic? But me. That's literally what communism is. Join the party.
Well, you have to be a member of the party in order to participate in politics, right?
That's right.
There's been lots of, I remember my dad telling me something about when I said, well, how come it's not compulsory to vote, in America? Why doesn't everybody have to vote? And he said, well, like if you look at authoritarian, oppressive societies that still have voting, they require everyone to vote. So like not voting, choosing not to vote is also a freedom in itself. And so, just no doubt, it kind of feels like we're going backwards in some ways. I was listening this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to, but there's oral arguments in the Supreme Court today about the Voting Rights Act and about racial gerrymandering in the state of Louisiana. And really interesting argument. It's actually a re-argument. I think they already heard these oral arguments, and they took the unusual step, the court, of asking for people for everybody to come back and argue again. So I didn't catch the end of it, but it's super interesting. And once again, I just want to say, like, we definitely point out the problems here on the Independent Voter podcast, but our democracy is still alive and well, everyone. Like, don't doubt it for a second. The fact that we are having all the arguments that we're having is a testament to that.
Right.
And
and it'll go on and it'll improve, and we're allowed to be self-righteous and be offended and upset and everything. But what's frustrating is you go, okay, well, if we're on the brink of the world's ending, well then, I mean, maybe we should just go to the water park and enjoy it our last days or something. But it's like, how many times throughout history of the United States we thought we were on the brink? It's like, you can choose to be pessimistic, or you can choose to be optimistic and say, okay, well, we're going to improve ourselves because of this, right? We improved ourselves in the 1940s when we got to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said what probably the substantial majority of America, frankly, already believed was, when are we going to stop treating people of another color differently and think that they have less rights? I mean, most people, believe in fairness and these ideas, and it's a matter of time before we figure out the right way to do it. Because the reality is, and we all know, both political sides will use arguments of fairness and equity and all that stuff claiming what they're doing is for that purpose when it's really not. And so it takes a long time for us all to fluff that out and the courts to get, and hopefully we end up getting it right.
So, speaking of something that's been taking a really long time, do you want to talk about the story that I wrote this week about Fox News and cannabis, and
It's a good one.
Fox News being very anti-pot, and
Yeah.
that basically cannabis has been scheduled alongside heroin since, in the drug laws and the scheduling laws since like 1970. And no president has ever been able to get it rescheduled to put it with fentanyl, it doesn't have to be like Schedule 1, the very worst, or put it
Right.
with, it, it's not as dangerous as heroin. Like, everyone knows this. And we
Yeah.
have all of these laws. Now we have, how many states is cannabis legal? It's like half the states at least, right?
Yeah, almost, I think.
And we have this total incompatibility then between the federal law, which says cannabis is Schedule 1 alongside heroin, and then the state laws, which say we're open from 9 to 7 p.m. to buy legal, regulated cannabis where it's taxed and where you can go and buy it. And so the laws are, and then, of course, the criminal justice laws are all completely incompatible. But for the first time, really, since Nixon, we have a President Trump, who looks like he might take the step to reschedule it. And so there are people who are against this, who have sort of turned up the volume, I would say, on a lot of this anti-cannabis propaganda. And Fox News kind of stepped right into the mix this week with what I think is a pretty dishonest story about 106 drivers in Ohio who had THC in their blood when they died in a car crash. And they put up on the screen half of all, fatal crash report finds that half of all deadly wrecks are tied to THC, to this illegal drug. Hundreds of crash victims, far exceeded the limits. And, drivers are driving while they're high, and it's costing them their lives. And they put up all these statistics on the screen. And so we just decided, let's just take a look at those statistics and figure out if any of this is real. And let me tell you, it was so distorted what they did. And then they had this guy on called Alex Berenson, who was declared the pandemic's wrongest man. And, he was just talking about these people are driving in these accidents. They're driving really fast. I can point to all these cases where people are going more than 100 miles per hour because if you're smoking cannabis, you're going to get paranoid, and then you're going to get psychotic.
Garrett, can I just stop? Can I just say something right there?
Yeah.
The fact that somebody says because you're smoking cannabis, you're going to be driving too fast is a good indication. I have no idea what they're talking about.
So
you're more likely to see a bunch of people going 15 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour zone than you are a bunch of people speeding.
Well, and he says that the people are going to be speeding because they're paranoid and psychotic, and that they're going to think that people are chasing them, which is going to cause them to go fast. And this is all literally based on this study that was done at Wright University, which over 6 years found a grand total of 106 people who died in deadly wrecks who had cannabis in their system. But it didn't say what else they had in their system. It didn't
say whether it was just cannabis, cause,
or that it was the cause, or anything. And then they also had this crazy statistic that they put up on the screen where they said basically rescheduling is coming, and it's going to lead to all these terrible things. And look, in Ohio, the drivers who died with cannabis in their blood increased in between the time that cannabis was recreationalized in the state versus now, but none of the data was actually from 2024. So they said that it had gone up, and the data set in the study didn't even have any data in the study, didn't even include anyone in the study that died after the fact, after the
And
legalization.
if I can, because I mean, we've probably exposed our bias here a little bit, which I've always made the
Totally.
point, like independent, we all have biases, independent, right? So we probably share a common bias on this issue. And I do want to say, like, the point of the story isn't the position, right? I can understand. I actually have a lot of empathy for the folks that, maybe, who knows, like there's a lot of people come from a religious perspective. There's a lot of people may have had, somebody in their family started smoking marijuana and then went down the pathway, and it was a gateway for them and caused serious harm to the family. I don't want to diminish the folks that have a point of view that maybe this should be treated very badly. The point I think about this story with Kara is like, and look, we could do this on issues of CNN and MSNBC too. It's just how blatant the propaganda was on how silly this story was for anybody that did their research. Like, okay, you're going to take a position, be honest about it, but they've obviously cooked up some just garbage because somebody, who knows, is it an advertiser, is it an influencer, I don't know, is it Rupert Murdoch? I have no idea, but the absurdity to which they tried to present this story is just, come on, it wasn't a credible story, and it was obvious that it was a political push to try to prevent what they might view as the first time a ironically Republican president pushing the rescheduling issue.
Yeah, I mean, the timing is super interesting, of course, and probably motivated by that very decision that the president said in the Oval Office maybe 5-6 weeks ago that he was looking at it very seriously at doing this, and that's sort of an imminent thing. And it's just really interesting, the whole issue politically, because the people that Trump can't really necessarily afford to disappoint, the white evangelical voters who are such a huge part of his base and of the MAGA movement, are maybe not for this. Maybe they are. I don't know, but he definitely would stand to gain a lot electorally by rescheduling cannabis. It would be a very popular decision in the country.
We could have a whole podcast or 3 podcasts on this issue, right? I think we're probably running up on time right there.
Yeah. But one thing that I did want to talk about this week is that Independent Voter on our Facebook this week, we asked this question also about the president. We said, should President Trump be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? And can you believe it, Chad? We had more than 65,000 comments from our audience answering this question. Our post was viewed by more than 2 million people, which is really incredible. And so you want to talk about whether or not do you think Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize? We have a big development in this week with the hostages being brought home to Israel. 20 hostages returned home.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, you see the comments. There's obviously some people very passionately about that he does not deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, right? And there's people very passionate for it, right? We're the Independent Voter Prize. There's passions on both sides. But my personally, and say, look, how could you not, with a straight face, say this is at least worthy of consideration? Because it's not just the Israel deal. I mean, if you go back, he was behind the Abraham Accords, and then we have the peace that he's brought to Rwanda, and then he's gotten involved. So if you take those as an aggregate, what's the purpose of the Nobel Peace Prize, right? He participated in quite a few peace deals. So to say that absolutely no, or right, is, I don't know. I don't think you can say that with a straight face unless you're purely just don't like the guy or you're purely partisan.
I think that even Hillary Clinton acknowledged that if Trump was able to bring peace in the Middle East, that he would deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. So maybe we could wrap it up there. It's been great to talk to you. I hope you get home safe and sound from your travels.
I got a little bit longer, so I think we're going to talk one more time while I'm in Brazil. But
okay, good. Well, how's your Portuguese coming?
Minha Português tá bom. my kids speak a lot better Portuguese than me, which is the coolest part. So my wife and I actually we went away to her brother, another part of Brazil, and for like 4 days, and I came back, and my 2-year-old daughter is just speaking to me in Portuguese now. So
a mile a minute. That's great. That's great. Well, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, and thanks for joining us again, everyone. And we will see you the next time on the Independent Voter Podcast. See you next Wednesday. Bye.
All right. Bye, Kara. Bye, everybody.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.